Everybody, another episode of Fat City Spinout. My name is Doug. If you're tuning in for the first time, this is my series of recent spins, new arrivals to the music collection, that kind of deal. Thought I would come on here with a special Easter long weekend edition. Had a bit of a spike in new arrivals. Thought I would start clearing those out, sharing them with you guys. It's glorious sunshine outside. We're set for a great long weekend here. Still a little on the chilly side in the shade in the early mornings and the evenings. Recent reading, I'm almost finished the second volume of a trilogy of reggae histories from Jamaican Recordings, a label I can't unreservedly recommend, but these books are great. This is volume 2 of a trilogy, as I said, just came out, Rocksteady to Rockers, kind of detailing the reggae scene through the 70s with a focus on the producers and their studios, more on the recording side than focusing on the artists. Very fascinating, lots of info. Every book in this series so far has had little pieces of info I hadn't heard before that kind of make me sit up and go, what? Great books here. This one's quite thick volume and got a copy signed by the authors, Noel Hawkes and Ja Floyd. This follows on from the first volume, The Birth of Ska. One more still to come, hasn't been published yet. Had a bit of a rocky time the last week or so. Got an infection on my finger somehow that's required medication. Also found out my blood pressure is high. Not quite in the danger zone, but creeping up there. It is coming down now. Was maybe explaining why I was going through a lot of lack of energy, lack of kind of motivation to do things like these videos. Since then, it's starting to come down, feeling better, so that might have something to do with it. Maybe it's the weather, but you guys didn't tune in for a life update, medical history update, so on to the records. I had a package arrive recently from the Real Gone music label. You may remember in previous episodes I was talking a couple of times about their Black Jazz reissue program. Since then I've become a bit of a fan of the label. Some nice reissues with an eclectic selection of genres, not a huge amount of reggae, but a few kind of odds and ends that I've found intriguing and nicely presented at an affordable price. So the first one that I dug into was the Flamingos Flamingo Serenade, originally released 1959 on the End record label. This is a brand new reissue from Real Gone Music on powder blue vinyl. There's also a pink edition, I believe. The Flamingos were a doo-wop rhythm and blues harmony group originally formed in Chicago in the early 1950s. Had some regional success on Chess Records. Some members were drafted into military service, so they had to reshuffle the lineup and eventually moved to New York City and the End record label, where they came up with the strategy of somewhat in the style that another black vocal group, the Platters, was doing, adapting old show tunes, pop standards into a more updated contemporary vocal style, and they soon began scoring a series of hits on the End label, many of which collected on this LP. The most major of which, and you've probably heard, is I Only Have Eyes for You. The band initially struggled to come up with an arrangement of the song that didn't feel too vanilla, too whitewashed, too homogenized, until one night member Terry Buzzy Johnson had a dream where the harmonies and the chord structures came to him. He woke up in an excited state, the chords coming through his fingertips like it had been put there by a higher source, excitedly called the other members of the group to his room at 4 a.m. so they could practice and capture the song before it slipped away from his memory, and it became a massive pop hit for the group and a classic of the doo-wop early rock and roll era. The group would go on to many other successes, adapting classics from the American Songbook in a more updated style for the contemporary pop and early rock and roll markets. This goes along with another LP I have by them, the Flamingos, Requestfully Yours, originally released the year after that Flamingo Serenade LP. This is a 1980s pressing on Roulette Records I've had for a while now. Classic. Back Out on the Streets Again, I Only Have Eyes for You, been used in many films, TV shows, with an expressive lead vocal by Nate Nelson. You probably know that song. Classic doo-wop harmony.
It always made me stay inside. There's one thing that I know for sure. I've got a reason to like it since you took me for a rainbow ride. It's raining, it's pouring, but I don't care no more. It's like a yellow balloon on a rainy afternoon. And it's a yellow balloon. I never felt this way before.
I had a few interesting cheap bin finds at one of my local record stores from the rock end of the spectrum. One of the ones I was most excited to find, yet kind of concerned about the condition. Usually when you find them that cheap, around $4 or $5, they're trashed. This one, definitely in the VG minus, G plus range on the vinyl, ended up playing very well, just a slight bit of crackle here and there, but some tearing on the cover. It is the Yellow Balloon, original from 1967 on the Canterbury label. I know the title track, I have it on a compilation somewhere, so I know what it was. Really memorable song, very catchy, very hooky. The Yellow Balloon was a sunshine pop group formed by songwriter Gary Zeekley along with actor Don Grady, who was then starring as Robbie Brady on the TV sitcom My Three Sons. I can remember watching that as a teen in the 80s. It was still on the air in syndication. Can't remember too much about it. And the group also featured at one point Daryl Dragon, the future captain of Captain and Tennille. These guys obviously paying close attention to the Beach Boys production style of the time. Apparently the Yellow Balloon, the song, was originally intended for Jan and Dean, another surf rock group closely associated with the Beach Boys. Just heavy on the hooks, choral harmonies, all upbeat, all sugary. It's going to give you a sugar rush or a vitamin D rush. Just glorious sunshine pop from 1967. Perfect for cruising down Santa Monica Boulevard in your vintage Corvette with the top down and these songs cranking over your AM radio. The Yellow Balloon. Probably about 15 years or so ago, maybe even more, when I first started seriously collecting records, going around to the thrift stores to see what I could find. I had picked up one album by a group I'd never heard of. It was called Westbound No. 9. The group is called Flaming Ember, here on the Buddha label, circa 1970. Flaming Ember, Westbound Number 9, the hit single from this album. They were kind of a blue-eyed soul group out of Detroit. I had long heard there was a second album by them that was worth checking out. So after all these years, on my recent run through the cheap bins in one of my local stores, I found it, probably about $4 or something. The Flaming Ember Sunshine. This is from a year later, about 1970. Kind of an unusual gatefold design there. There's the group there. Here they are. This one is appearing on the Hot Wax label, which was a subsidiary of Holland, Dozier and Holland's Invictus group after they had defected from Berry Gordy's Motown. Of course, the great songwriters and arrangers over there. And they're working here with the Flaming Ember, with many ex-Motown staffers, including songwriter William Weatherspoon, who had written many songs at Motown, including co-writing What Becomes of the Broken Hearted, done by Jimmy Ruffin. Producers and arrangers H.B. Barnum. H.B. Barnum had done his own records, as well as working with Frank Sinatra, Count Basie, Aretha Franklin, and many more. And producer Greg Perry did his own album here. This was another thrift store blind buy many years ago. It was still sealed. How could you not buy that album? Cool 70s soul album by Greg Perry, who is one of the producers on the Flaming Embers' second album. And this one is on Hot Wax. Usually if I find anything on that label, it's trashed. Again, the blue-eyed soul influences on here with more of a harder rock edge. They kind of look like they're trying out for the Easy Rider film here. And indeed, there's sort of a Steppenwolf vibe on many of the tracks on here. Perfect for cranking up your hog and hitting the highway with your beard and your long hair flowing in the wind. While other songs sound like they're trying to be the Temptations. Luckily, they do both sides very well. Cool album by the Flaming Ember. While I tend not to be a major 1970s prog rock kind of guy, I have enjoyed some of the records I've picked up by English band Renaissance, who brought something of a folk and classical influence to their music, along with the 5-octave vocal range of lead singer Annie Haslam. So I was pleased to find her debut solo album on my cheap bin haul. Annie Haslam's Annie in Wonderland, obviously referencing Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland on the cover with Annie as Alice. This is produced and arranged with several of the songs written and some of the music played by Roy Wood from The Move and ELO, bringing kind of a recognizable sound from those bands to some of the tracks. There's some eccentric kind of left turns or about faces in some of the songs. The wordless, almost operatic Rock-a-Lease suddenly veers off into a rockabilly shuffle with skronking saxophones. There's a cover of Eden Abez's Nature Boy, which takes on a jazz funk flavor. One song, Honey Yoko, is quite folky, kind of world music, and then suddenly turns into kind of an African chanting and drumming session towards the end. Annie Haslam, Annie in Wonderland, kind of a sometimes surreal but fun trip. speaking of progressive rock, I've developed a bit of a taste for that which came out of the province of Quebec, Canada in the 1970s. Maybe it's the language barrier, makes you focus more on the music, the mood it creates. Maybe it's that it tends to be more acoustic, more introspective, but there's something about it I find appealing, so I do keep an eye out for that. One I picked up on my recent cheap bin haul was by Maneige, album called Ni Vent Ni Nouvelle from 1977 on Polydor. They often come with this beautiful, very progressive rock style artwork as well. I did pick up an earlier album by this group, found it a bit too highbrow perhaps. This one more accessible. They were an all-instrumental group, no vocals, bringing a lot of jazz influences, some classical, lots of woodwinds, strings, keys into the mix. This one leaning more to shorter compositions than the earlier album, more accessible, more of a jazz and even Latin feel. There's even a drum break on one of these tracks. So Maneige enjoyed this one quite a bit. Group led by Alain Bergeron. Another one from my cheap bin haul at the record stores. This is a band I'd heard of, had recommended to me, had never found anything by them before. It is The Savage Rose. They are a Danish avant-garde and psychedelic band formed in 1967. This is a 1971 album called Your Daily Gift on the Gregor label. 1971. It's got one of those inner gatefold sleeves. The band was formed in 1967 by two brothers, Thomas and Anders Koppel. They were sons of a German Jewish classical composer, had to flee Nazi Germany. The older Thomas was born in a refugee camp in Sweden before they moved to Denmark. With singer Anisette, they formed the band, released a couple of albums before this. Psychedelic with some Baroque and classical leanings. The brothers were also classical composers. They composed symphonies and ballets, including a ballet the year of this album that was performed in the nude in Denmark. But the singer, somewhat of a interesting voice, not sure if I like it yet. She has somewhat of that precious kind of twee little girl sound of Melanie Safka on some tracks, with a harder rocking sound. Need to spend a little more time with this one, figure out if I like it. Interesting release. Apparently they've been intermittently active ever since, though the older Koppel brother Thomas has since passed away. Him and the singer Anisette were partners, had children together, and were very committed to social justice causes, which saw them move to the US in the 1990s, I believe. The Savage Rose, Your Daily Gift. Last one for my recent cheap bin haul, last one for today. A few years back at a record fair, I found a record I'd heard about, had never seen it before. It is the debut by a Canadian folk duo called Fraser and DeBolt, Alan Fraser and Daisy DeBolt. They had met, liked each other's voices, became a couple, and formed a duo, performed around the folk circuit on the East Coast. Interesting blend of voices. He has more your typical laid-back, country kind of folk voice, but she has this angular, abrasive, raw kind of voice. The two not so much harmonizing together as coming from completely different places with this sort of alternating push and pull kind of tension going on. A highlight of the album, which is completely acoustic, just them on guitars, plus Ian Gunther on violin, was a cover of the Beatles' Don't Let Me Down, which I never really liked the original of, but their version, knowing they were a real-life couple at the time, kind of lays bare the neediness, the insecurity of the original lyrics as they kind of lay bare their emotions on record. Was very intriguing. I had long heard there was a second LP by them, not quite as good, but when I saw it in the cheap bins, a couple of bucks, I couldn't resist it. This is from a couple of years later, 1973, also on Columbia, called With Pleasure. Includes original lyric sheet and one of those Columbia Records inserts. This finds them working with a full band of hippie friends, so much wider instrumentation, bigger arrangements, but still outsider folk, I guess you would call it, with Fraser and DeBolt. They're interesting, contrasting voices, you might say. Indeed, not quite as good as the first one, but for a couple of bucks, not a bad pickup. They would go their separate ways after this. Alan Fraser, I believe, is still active today on the folk circuit. Daisy DeBolt sadly passed away several years ago. That's it for you for today, guys. Got more to share with you guys. I'm in the process of listening, putting some thoughts together. Be sure and check me out on Facebook and Instagram. Links down below. I usually kind of write and go into a bit more depth on some of the records you've seen here. So thanks for watching. Take care. Should be back to my Lee Perry series next time if all things go according to plan. So thanks for watching and cheers.